All right, for those of you joining us on the recording, welcome to week 18, our last seminar session for this semester and actually for this class, since government does not extend into semester two, at least not with me. So anyway, we will get underway here. Start with some brief announcements here. So remember, and that one's already passed. Last call for Unit 5 test was yesterday at 8 p.m. So yeah, that's done now. I have gone through and graded the ones that were submitted as of yesterday at about noon or so. So I will go through, and any of the stragglers, I'll pick those up today before I go home. So you can check your grade on that. Be sure that you've skimmed through chapters 5 through 8 before taking the final exam, since there will be a couple questions based on those chapters on the final. So just make sure you've skimmed through. I apologize, I did not have time to do audio recordings of those chapters. Just not enough hours in the day. Make sure to sign up for a final exam time. There is an instruction sheet in the course, and then there is also a link to a form where you can sign up for a time. Please do that sooner rather than later. I would really prefer not to be trying to make plans with people next week. I'd like to have that done before I go home tomorrow if possible. And I have times Tuesday morning and afternoon, Wednesday morning and afternoon, and then Thursday morning. If none of those are going to work for somebody, please get with me again sooner rather than later. Don't wait until next week. I will be very upset if I'm having to deal and come up with some sort of alternate plan after, I've begged people to get in and get this done. So make sure to sign up for a time or email me if none of the times listed are going to work. Please put that in the form and then send me an email so that we can find some kind of time or some sort of situation for you to get this final exam done. There is a review packet posted in the course. It is not required, but it is worth 25 points of extra credit if you do it. It is due before you take the final exam. Doing it after you take the final exam would be stupid. So get that in, get it done. A couple people have asked, there is a word bank for the first section, and then the second section just kind of comes out of nowhere. And they're like, does the word bank continue? No. The second section is more of a free-form answer sort of arrangement. I did not design that review sheet. I borrowed a review from a teacher, I believe at Great Falls High. And I have not had the time to make it better or change it or make something that is my own. I've only taught government sporadically the last few years, and so I haven't put the time into trying to make something better. So it's just kind of what it is. So I apologize for that. I did go through all of the grades for government, and I excused up to 100 points. For most people, it was between 90 and 100 points worth of zeros, or occasionally I would put in, like, if you got a 5 out of 20 on like a seminar, news quiz, journal combo. If I had trouble coming up with zeros for you, I would sometimes excuse those. But I did go through and excuse up to 100 points worth of zeros from everybody's grade. Like I said, if you already had a really strong A, I probably had trouble finding 100 points worth of zeros to excuse for you. So you may not have gotten as much just because you already have a really good A. There just wasn't anything to excuse. So be aware that I have done that. It was not something that, if you were at like a 40%, it has miraculously raised you to passing. No. It raised you probably a few percentage points. But for some people, if you were in the upper 50s, it may have bumped you into passing territory. So just make sure to check your grades. If you have questions about what I did, get with me. I'm happy to explain to you what I did. Yeah. And then make sure to do this week's seminar assignments. They're the last ones. Finish strong. I mean, all of you, with a few exceptions, really need as many points as you can get. And so these 20 points could make the difference for some of you. So week 18 CNN 10 News Quiz and week 18 Seminar Journal. All right. So I thought it might be beneficial this week, since it's been a heck of a last week, to kind of talk through sort of what happened and what's happening, etc. So yeah. So last week, just to sort of refresh, over the weekend, a recording of President Trump calling the Georgia Secretary of State and requesting that that person, Raffensperger, I believe is his last name, find him, President Trump, the requisite number of votes in order to win the state of Georgia, was released to the media. This after the president had tweeted about the call. So it's not like this was super secret and the Secretary of State then leaked this super secret call. The president had already tweeted that he had spoken to the Secretary of State, and the Secretary of State released his recording of the call. So that happened over the weekend. On Monday, the president held a big rally in Georgia for the two Republican Senate candidates. And then on Tuesday, Georgia went to the polls. Although actually a record number of Georgians had already voted before Election Day, this ended up being a record-breaking turnout for a runoff election in Georgia. There is so much media attention around this that a lot of people went out to the polls and voted early, and then voted on the day of. And then on Wednesday morning, Tuesday night, the races weren't settled. Well, maybe Warnock's was. But by Wednesday morning, both races had been called for the Democratic Party candidates. Raphael Warnock, and I believe I probably misspelled his first name. I apologize to Reverend Warnock, and John Ossoff were declared the winners of those races. I do not believe that has been officially 100% certified, but I have not heard tell that anything is going to be overturned. So that means that the Democrats come right around January 20th will control the U.S. Senate. Currently, the Senate is controlled by the Republicans, but once those two senators are seated and President Biden is sworn in and Vice President Harris is sworn in, the Democrats will take over control of the U.S. Senate, and we talked about that last week. So that was before Wednesday afternoon last week. Actually, during Wednesday's seminar session last week was when we started to learn about the attack on the Capitol. There was a terrorist attack on the U.S. Capitol. A big group of domestic terrorists showed up and attempted to stop the counting of the electoral votes that was happening in a joint session of Congress. They had just separated the two houses because there was an objection to the count from Arizona, and a member of the House and a member of the Senate both objected, and at that point the two houses split and they go to their separate houses to discuss the objection. Had no senator joined that, the objection would have been overruled, basically, by the chair, by Vice President Pence, who was presiding over the joint session of Congress at the time. But these folks stormed the Capitol. They had started out at a speech at the White House in what's known as the ellipse at the White House, which is where cars pull up to like drop people off. If you think about the White House, it's where you think about people getting out of cars. So that's where this speech was taking place. And the president encouraged the people at the speech to march on the Capitol. And so that is what they did, and that very quickly got out of hand, and there were people tearing down the American flags and putting up Trump flags, and they broke into the building, and they overwhelmed Capitol security, and all heck broke loose. Congress had to be evacuated. They were hiding in the galleries. They were hiding in their offices. There was a gallows set up, and there were chants of hang Mike Pence because the vice president had announced that he was not going to, well, basically that he couldn't. He did not have any authority to overturn the vote count. There was no way to do that constitutionally. And so they wanted to hang Mike Pence. There were threats against the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, and other members of Congress. No members of Congress ended up being harmed, although a few of them have contracted coronavirus in the subsequent days because obviously when they were hiding for their lives, they were not social distancing. So coronavirus has run sort of rampant, but you can see the big, part of the big group that was there, climbing the walls, etc. There were several Confederate flags wandering around the Capitol building. There's one guy, he has since been arrested. The gentleman with the lectern there on the bottom picture, he has since been arrested for breaking in and making off with the lectern and being part of this thing. There have been several arrests, and there are ongoing investigations of a number of people. They are still identifying people that were involved in this. A couple of the protesters were killed, and at least one member of the Capitol Police, perhaps two, were killed. So this was an act of domestic terrorism. This was an effort to basically overthrow the rightfully elected government and install a president who had not either won the popular vote or the Electoral College. It was an act of domestic terrorism, absolutely, positively. No ifs, ands, or buts. So the work of Congress did go forward after they managed to clear the Capitol, and later that night and into the next morning, into Thursday morning, Congress was counting the electoral votes. That finished up early Thursday morning. Before they did that, however, there was lots of speechifying going on, and I did pull a couple of those speeches. This first one is from Senator Lindsey Graham, who has been in the past and largely continues to be a defender of President Trump. But on that evening, he did very publicly sort of break with the president, but he has since flown with the president on Air Force One down to the border to tour the border wall. So they're still tight. They're still buds. But this is the speech that Graham gave. I'll warn you, it's about 6 minutes.
I want to go to the Senate floor right now. Lindsey Graham, who has been perhaps the most stalwart supporter of the president in the Senate these last few years, his golfing buddy, golf whisperer for the president, most loyal supporter, just won re-election in November, taking to the Senate floor and writing himself away from the objections to the certification of the Electoral College.
Die, but no time soon. Tim and I have a good relationship. I love Tim Scott. 1876, South Carolina, Louisiana, and Florida sent two slate of electors. They had two governments, by the way, and we didn't know what to do. Why did South Carolina, Florida, and Louisiana do it? To hold the country hostage to end Reconstruction. It worked. The commission was 8-7. It didn't work. Nobody accepted it. The way it ended is when Hayes did a deal with these 3 states. You give me the electors, I'll kick the Union Army out. The rest is history. It led to Jim Crow. If you're looking for historical guidance, this is not the one to pick. If you're looking for a way to convince people there was no fraud, having a commission chosen by Nancy Pelosi, Mitch McConnell, and John Roberts is not going to get you to where you want to go. It ain't going to work. So it's not going to do any good. It's going to delay, and it gives credibility to a dark chapter of our history. That's why I'm not with you. But I will fight to my death for you. You're able to object. You're not doing anything wrong. Other people have objected. I just think it's a uniquely bad idea to delay this election. Trump and I, we've had a hell of a journey. I hate it to end this way. Oh, my God, I hate it. From my point of view, he's been a consequential president. But today, first thing you'll see. All I can say is count me out. Enough is enough. I've tried to be helpful. But when the Wisconsin Supreme Court ruled 4-3 that they didn't violate the Constitution of Wisconsin, I agree with the 3, but I accept the 4. If Al Gore can accept 5-4, he's not president. I can accept Wisconsin 4-3. Pennsylvania, it went to the Second Circuit. So much for all the judges being in Trump's pocket. They said, no, you're wrong. I accept the Pennsylvania Second Circuit that Trump's lawsuit wasn't right. Georgia, they said the Secretary of State took the law in his own hands. He changed the election laws unlawfully. A federal judge said, no, I accept the federal judge even though I don't agree with it. Fraud. They said there's 66,000 people in Georgia under 18 voted. How many people believe that? I asked, give me 10. I hadn't had one. They said 8,000 felons in prison in Arizona voted. Give me 10. I hadn't gotten one. Does that say there's problems in every election? I don't buy this. Enough's enough. We got to end it. Vice President Pence, what they're asking you to do, you won't do because you can't. You talk about interesting times. I associate myself with Rand Paul. How many times will you hear that? The mob has done something nobody else could do to get me and Rand to agree. Rand is right. If you're a conservative, this is the most offensive concept in the world, that a single person could disenfranchise 155 million people. The President of the Senate shall, in the presence of the Senate and the House of Representatives, open all certificates, and the votes shall then be counted. The person having the greatest number of votes for president shall be president. Where in there does it say Mike can say, I don't like the results? I want to send them back to the states. I believe there was fraud. To the conservatives who believe in the Constitution, now's your chance to stand up and be counted. Originalism, count me in. It means what it says. So, Mike, Mr. Vice President, just hang in there. They said we can count on Mike. All of us can count on the Vice President. You're going to do the right thing. You're going to do the constitutional thing. You got a son who flies F-35s. You got a son-in-law who flies F-18s. They're out there flying so that we can get it right here. There are people dying, to my good friend from Illinois, to make sure we have a chance to argue among ourselves. And when it's over, it is over. It is over. The final thing, Joe Biden. I've traveled the world with Joe. I hoped he lost. I prayed he would lose. He won. He's the legitimate president of the United States. I cannot convince people, certain groups, by my words, but I will tell you by my actions that maybe I, above all others in this body, need to say this. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are lawfully elected and will become the president and the vice president of the United States on January the 20th.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos.
All right. So, again, that was Lindsey Graham, and I apologize. It's kind of a lengthy talk. This one's much shorter. This is Mitt Romney. Romney, interesting for a couple of reasons. Number one, he was the 2012 Republican nominee for president. He lost to President Obama in that election. Also, he was the only Republican senator to vote for the conviction of President Trump on the one of the charges of impeachment that was brought in 2019 and tried early in 2020 before COVID took off. It seems like a million years ago. Really, it does. I don't know. Time no longer has meaning. But yeah, so this is Mitt Romney giving his little, and I think this one's only like 2 minutes, maybe.
Now we gather due to a selfish man's injured pride and the outrage of supporters who he has deliberately misinformed for the past 2 months and stirred to action this very morning. What happened here today was an insurrection incited by the President of the United States. Those who choose to continue to support his dangerous gambit by objecting to the results of a legitimate democratic election will forever be seen as being complicit in an unprecedented attack against our democracy. Fairly or not, they'll be remembered for their role in this shameful episode in American history. That will be their legacy. I salute Senator Langford and Loeffler and Braun and Daines, and I'm sure others, who in the light of today's outrage have withdrawn their objection. For any who remain insistent on an audit in order to satisfy the many people who believe that the election was stolen, I'd offer this perspective. No congressional audit is ever going to convince these voters, particularly when the president will continue to say that the election was stolen. The best way we can show respect for the voters who are upset is by telling them the truth. That's the burden. That's the duty of leadership. The truth is that President-elect Biden won the election. President Trump lost. I've had that experience myself. It's no fun.
Yeah, so he alluding there to losing to President Obama back in 2012. So those are both members of the president's party who are saying, you know, it's over. You lost. Get over yourself. So they did finally finish the counting of the electoral votes early that following morning, 306 to 232, just as the count was predicted to be, just as the states won. I do not believe there were any faithless electors in this election. There was thought before the electoral count that maybe we'd see a few, but I do not believe there were any faithless electors in this election. So yeah, Joe Biden will be sworn in on January 20th. So in the aftermath of all of this, probably most notably is Twitter is quiet. The president has been kicked off of Twitter and actually most mainstream social media, Facebook, Snapchat, yeah, most mainstream social media, the president has been kicked off due to his role in, I mean, you heard Romney say it, he incited a rebellion. Now, the one of the places where the president and his supporters were seen to potentially be going was a service called Parler. That has been kicked off of, they were hosted by Amazon Web Services, which incidentally, Amazon has a tremendous influence over the running of the World Wide Web because their servers manage an obscene percentage of the web's traffic. So, yeah, if you tick off Amazon, if they don't like what you're doing, they can use their, basically saying, hey, we provide a service here and we don't have to provide it, they can kick you off, and that's what they've done to Parler. Other vendors will not do business with Parler, so Parler is, as of this moment, pretty much dead in the water. I don't know if it's officially shut down, but it's going that direction. Several corporations have announced that they will not do business with President Trump. His major banking partner in his private enterprises, Deutsche Bank, has announced they will no longer do business with him. The city of New York will no longer continue contracts with the Trump organization for several things, including, and I didn't realize this, the Trump organization ran the Central Park carousel. So they are no longer going to be doing that because the city of New York has said, nope, we're not doing business with the Trump organization anymore. Swipe, which is a credit card processor, has refused now to process payments for the Trump campaign. President Trump's campaign was still raising money. And they have said they're not going to do that. The PGA Tour announced that they will not hold their championship in 2022 at the Trump National Bedminster, New Jersey golf course. And all future tournaments that were supposed to be hosted there will not be hosted there. They have said that that is not good for their brand. Major corporations are withholding political contributions actually to both parties at this point. Basically the flow of money from corporations into politics has, for the moment, certainly slowed down. Now, I would say probably after 6 months or so, it will kick back in. But interesting that corporate America has a conscience of some type. Several White House staffers and cabinet officials have resigned. This includes the former White House Chief of Staff, Mick Mulvaney, the former press secretary and the person who was Chief of Staff to the First Lady resigned, and then cabinet officials including the Secretary of Transportation, Elaine Chao. She is also, by the way, the wife of Senate Majority Leader, soon to be Senate Minority Leader, turtle guy. Oh, for goodness sakes. My brain has stopped working. Mitch McConnell. Good gravy. And then also the Secretary of Education, Betsy DeVos. So both of those people have resigned. DeVos's was official on Monday. Chao's, I believe, was immediate. So as of basically like Wednesday night, I believe she had resigned. And then several arrests have been made, including the guy on your screen there who broke into the Speaker's office and stole mail from her desk. The guy with the Confederate flag, the guy carrying off the lectern. You may have seen the picture of the weird guy with the horns. He's been arrested, and there are lots of investigations ongoing. Most of those cases are being transferred and being prosecuted out of the District of Columbia, even though a lot of these folks were from other places. They've been arrested in Georgia and Tennessee and all over the place. But yeah, they are being, most of their hearings are being handled in Washington, D.C. So they are, some of these people have had to basically surrender their passports, but they are expected to show up for their hearings in D.C. So then early this week, the House attempted to pass a resolution. I believe they actually did pass it, calling on the vice president to invoke the 25th Amendment to basically take the president out of power. And we talked a little bit about the 25th last week. Even though the House did pass that resolution, the vice president said no, he will not remove the president from power using the 25th Amendment. And so an article of impeachment was introduced, I believe it was Tuesday, and it was voted on yesterday. That vote was successful, and I didn't update this from when I gave it yesterday, but 10 Republicans did join all of the Democrats in the chamber to approve that article of impeachment. So it was at least somewhat bipartisan. One of the people that supported this was the number 3 person in the Republican leadership in the House. Her name is Liz Cheney from the state of Wyoming, and she is the daughter of former U.S. Vice President Dick Cheney, who was vice president under George W. Bush. So that's really huge. That a member of the leadership would basically break ranks and support the impeachment of the president. And there's a possibility she will lose her leadership position because of that vote. Okay, so Mitch McConnell has announced that the Senate will not reconvene until the 19th of January, which is the day before the inauguration. So the likelihood is that the trial in the Senate will not convene until after Joe Biden has been sworn in. So you may be asking, what's the point? Because what you know about impeachment is it removes you from office. And if the person's already out of office, well, what's the point? Or would this even happen? Well, it could. A person no longer in office can still be impeached and convicted. And impeachment is the bringing of charges. So basically saying this person has done wrong. So in addition to a consequence of conviction being removal from office, which at this point, unless something changes dramatically in the next 24 hours, that's not going to be an issue. You do have another consequence, which would be if you are convicted, if so you're impeached, whatever your job is, president, federal judge, whatever. If you are convicted, you lose your pension. The president receives $200,000 a year as a pension for being a retired president. Also gets money for office staff, office space, a $1 million per year travel allowance, lots of post-presidency perks. If the president were convicted, even after he's left office, he would lose all of those post-presidency perks. I believe up to and including lifetime Secret Service protection. That is something that former presidents do receive. There was a time that they were only going to do it for like 10 years, and that's been changed. You do get lifetime Secret Service protection now. But if you are impeached and convicted, then you don't get lifetime Secret Service protection. So that's a major thing that could happen. Also, the Senate could, this is not automatic, but part of their sentencing could be barring a person from ever seeking or holding another office of what they call an office of public trust ever again. So that would bar President Trump from running in 2024. That has been on the table. There has been discussion that he would launch that campaign to retake the office as soon as January 20th. This would basically render that moot, and he would not be allowed to run or serve another term as president or in any office. I think up to and including like local offices. So why move forward with this even though the president's less than a week away from leaving office? Well, that also it would send a message if this is actually legitimate, which I think at this point we can say that it is, sending the message that this behavior is not okay. We do not countenance people fomenting rebellion against our democracy. Now, convicting the president will require 17 Republicans to vote to convict. That's a high bar. Will that happen? I don't know. I will say that the Senate Majority Leader, Mitch McConnell, has signaled that he is on the fence as to whether or not he would vote to convict. And the first time he basically said from the outset, absolutely, I'm not voting to convict. I will vote to acquit. The president will be acquitted. And only one Republican broke ranks to support any of the charges. Whereas now, if the majority leader supports conviction, it could happen. Not saying it will, I'm saying it could. So there you go. That's just kind of where we are at this moment. So next Wednesday during finals week, the new Biden administration will be sworn in. There have been threats against all 50 state capitals at this point. They are beefing up security in Washington, D.C. for Inauguration Day because there is a fear that something will be tried. They are not having a traditional inaugural parade because they fear something bad might happen. So it will be a very subdued inauguration, but it will take place. All right. So in our last journal for this semester, tell me what you found most interesting this semester in our study of the government of the United States. Okay. So any questions? All right, if there are no questions, I am going to let you be free. If you have something you want to talk to me about without the recording running, I will stop the recording and we can talk about it. So thank you. Have a nice day.